The Galactic Council chamber loomed vast and impersonal, its domed ceiling flickering with holographic star charts of 1,000 civilizations. Seated in a perfect semicircle were the delegates of the most powerful species in the galaxy, elders of the SciFi, the cold-blooded Visker, and, of course, the Shitaith, their warlord's scaled face curled in disdain. At the chamber's center, under the unblinking gaze of the council, stood the lone representative of Earth, Ambassador Thomas Richter, his suit crisp, his expression carefully neutral. "This is a waste of time," growled Warlord Drennick of the Shitaith, his voice a low rumble of contempt. "Humans are weak. You have no warrior caste, no combat lineage. You fight with machines, hide behind tactics. That is not strength." Richter remained still, his fingers tightening slightly behind his back. He had anticipated resistance, but not such outright dismissal. "We are not cowards," he said evenly. "Humanity has fought for survival for millennia. We may not have stood in your arenas, but we have waged war across every battlefield imaginable." Drennick bared his fangs in something between a grin and a snarl. "Then prove it. A trial, by our laws. One warrior, alone, against my finest." The chamber murmured. The terms were absurd. The Shitaith had conquered entire species through ritual combat, their champions the stuff of legend. To accept would be suicide. To refuse, humiliation. Richter exhaled, slow and steady. The council watched, waiting for Earth to back down. Instead, he nodded. "We accept." Lieutenant Jack Donovan tightened the straps on his rucksack and shifted his weight as the transport shuttle shuddered through atmospheric entry. He was alone in the cramped drop pod, the only human on board. His gear was stripped to the essentials: reinforced combat fatigues, a field knife, a compact survival kit. No weapons, no backup. It had taken exactly 4 minutes for command to call him in after Richter sent the challenge back to Earth. He hadn't hesitated. SEALs didn't hesitate. The comm link in his ear crackled. Final approach. 1 minute to drop, came the monotone voice of the ship's AI. Jack ran through the mission parameters one last time. No intelligence on the terrain. No knowledge of enemy numbers. Just survive, adapt, overcome. He felt the shift in gravity as the pod released. For a heartbeat, he was weightless. Then the force of descent pressed him into the harness. Flames licked past the viewport as the dense jungle world of Zarka 9 rushed up to meet him. Then impact. The pod slammed into the ground, the doors hissing open on a humid, green hell. Jack moved fast, melting into the underbrush even before the dust settled. The jungle was alive with sound, chittering things in the canopy, distant roars that didn't belong to anything he recognized. Massive roots twisted across the forest floor, slick with moisture. The air was thick, damp, carrying a scent of decay. He took stock. No immediate threats. That wouldn't last. A guttural growl confirmed it. He dropped to a knee, steadying his breath. 50 meters out, through the foliage, a figure moved, 8 feet tall, armored plates running down its hunched back. Shitaith, a scout. Jack stayed low, watching. The alien moved with predatory grace, sweeping the area with a weaponized gauntlet that bristled with plasma nodes. He noted its blind spots, the slight delay in its turns. Then he saw the others. 3 more, fanning out in a textbook search pattern. They weren't just hunting. They were testing him. Good. Jack adjusted his stance. The rules were different here. No rifle, no team, just instinct and experience. He ran through his options, settling on the most efficient one: bait. He grabbed a fist-sized stone and hurled it deep into the brush. The impact was loud enough to turn heads, and in that split second Jack moved. Silent, precise. He closed the distance on the nearest Shitaith, his knife slipping free. Before the scout could react, Jack drove the blade into the exposed joint between armor plates. The alien snarled, but Jack twisted the knife, severing something vital. The body hit the ground before the others realized what had happened. Then the jungle erupted. The remaining Shitaith spun, weapons charging. Jack was already moving. Plasma bolts tore through the underbrush as he sprinted into the trees, his path erratic, forcing them to divide their fire. He needed distance. An opening. A ravine loomed ahead, its edge barely visible through the vines. Without slowing, Jack leapt. He caught a thick branch midair, momentum carrying him up and over. He landed hard on the opposite side and rolled, vanishing into the foliage. Seconds later, heavy footsteps pounded behind him. The first Shitaith hit the edge at full speed, too focused on pursuit to stop. It tumbled forward with a sharp, guttural cry. Then silence. Jack didn't wait to see the body hit the rocks below. He turned his attention to the last two. They were learning, moving slower now, scanning the trees. One had activated an energy shield. The other had switched to thermal vision. Jack could hear the soft hum of their gear adjusting. They weren't underestimating him anymore. Good. He crouched, steadying his breath. The hunt had begun, and they weren't ready for him. The jungle pulsed with alien life, a cacophony of unseen predators and restless foliage. Jack lay still, pressed against the damp earth, feeling the vibrations of his pursuers through the tangled roots beneath him. The Shitaith warriors were cautious now, slower, methodical. He had drawn first blood, and that made them wary. Fear meant hesitation. Hesitation meant opportunity. He counted their movements. One had taken a high position in the trees, likely scanning with enhanced optics. The other circled wide, covering the ground approach. Their discipline was impressive. If they were human, he might have respected them. But they weren't, and they were hunting him. Jack exhaled slow and silent, shifting his weight ever so slightly. He had no weapons beyond his knife, but he had something better: terrain, unpredictability, and a lifetime of war-fighting experience. A distant shriek echoed through the jungle, something large, territorial, and hungry. The Shitaith paused. Jack used it. He moved. In a blur of motion, he scaled the nearest tree, hands finding purchase on thick, gnarled bark. He climbed fast, keeping his breath steady, his motions fluid. The canopy was dense, the air thick with humidity and the scent of wet foliage. Above him, the alien snipers scanned the underbrush, weapon raised, blind to the danger above. Jack reached him in 3 seconds. He struck hard and fast, locking an arm around the alien's throat, pulling it back as his knife found the gap beneath its jaw. A single brutal twist, and the body went limp. Jack held on, letting gravity do the work, easing the corpse down so it wouldn't make a sound. The sniper's weapon, a sleek, compact plasmacaster, was too alien to use effectively, but the belt-mounted grenades were another story. He took 2, secured them, and moved. The last hunter would know something was wrong. No radio chatter, no signals. Jack needed to be ahead of his reaction. Dropping to the ground, he crouched low, listening. Heavy, measured footfalls approached from the left. The Shitaith was disciplined. No panic charge, no wild scanning. He was sweeping methodically. Jack pulled the pin on the first grenade and tossed it behind him. The explosion was sharp and blinding, sending debris high into the trees. Not a direct attack, just a disruption. The warrior turned sharply, reacting on instinct. That was the mistake Jack was waiting for. He lunged. The fight was quick and brutal. The alien swung first, its gauntlet fist a wrecking ball of force. Jack barely slipped past it, feeling the air distort from the impact. He moved inside the warrior's reach, driving his knife up between armor plates. The alien roared in pain, grabbing at Jack, but the seal twisted the blade and ripped it free, stepping aside as the warrior staggered forward, choking on his own blood. Then there was silence. Jack wiped his blade clean and took a breath. That was 3 down. More would come. He had to move. The jungle ahead thickened into a wall of gnarled roots and broad, wet leaves. He pushed forward, forcing himself deeper into the unknown. The ground sloped downward, the air growing cooler. A faint mist clung to the undergrowth. Then he saw it. A ship. Small, sleek, half buried under vines and debris. The hull was scorched, the impact site suggesting it had crashed years ago. Jack approached cautiously, clearing the entrance with a quick sweep before stepping inside. The interior was dark, the air stale. The ship wasn't human, but wasn't Shite either. The control panels were cracked, the seats torn, but the emergency supply compartments, those were intact. Jack pried one open and exhaled. Weapons. Not many, and not in great condition, but enough. A projectile-based rifle, something close to a carbine, and 2 additional grenades. He checked the ammo. 3 full magazines. It wasn't much. It would have to do. A low vibration rumbled through the ground. Not from the ship. Something outside. Jack crouched low, gripping the rifle, ears straining. The jungle was too silent. Then he heard it. Heavy footfalls. Not Shite. Something bigger. A shape moved through the mist, towering, massive. A predator, all sinew and muscle, with jagged quills running down its back. Its maw dripped with something viscous, the elongated skull turning, sniffing the air. It was hunting him. Jack checked his options. Firing was a last resort. Sound would draw more attention. Running wasn't much better. He needed a plan. The predator stepped closer, powerful limbs shifting effortlessly over the terrain. Its eyes locked onto him. Jack took a slow breath. Then he moved. With a burst of speed, he sprinted left, grabbing a broken piece of hull and hurling it toward the tree-line. The clatter was loud, sharp. The predator's head snapped toward the noise, and in that moment, Jack dove forward, sliding beneath a tangle of roots. The creature roared, lunging, but Jack was already moving, weaving through the undergrowth, keeping low, unpredictable. He reached the edge of the clearing just as the beast crashed into the wreckage behind him. A distraction, temporary, but enough. Jack didn't look back. He had what he needed, and the real hunt was about to begin. Jack moved like a shadow through the jungle, his breath steady despite the exertion. The weight of the salvaged rifle was a comfort, the familiar heft of a weapon in his hands grounding him. He had tested it briefly, primitive by Earth standards, but serviceable. The ammo was kinetic, hard projectiles rather than plasma, which meant it wouldn't give away his position with an energy signature. That was good. He needed to stay invisible. The Shite were regrouping. He could hear them now, distant but deliberate, their guttural battle language carrying through the dense air. They were no longer hunting. Now they were tracking. His kills had changed the game. This wasn't a trial anymore. It was a mission. Survive. Adapt. Win. He paused near a fallen tree, crouching low as he surveyed the landscape. The jungle sloped downward ahead, feeding into a basin thick with mist. He had 2 choices, keep moving or set a trap. Jack chose the latter. He worked fast, hands moving with practiced efficiency. He rigged the 2 salvage grenades with a tripwire, stretching it low across a natural choke point between the roots of 2 massive trees. A simple trick, but effective. The moment one of them crossed the threshold, it would be over before they knew what hit them. He took position behind cover, rifle raised, and waited. The first one appeared minutes later, moving cautiously, weapons scanning. This one was different, bigger, more decorated. A commander, the leader of a hunt. Jack kept still, barely breathing. The alien's slit-pupiled eyes swept the terrain, nostrils flaring as it took in scents. Then another followed. Jack tightened his grip. 2 was a problem. 3 more stepped into view. That was worse. The lead warrior signaled, and the group spread out. They were searching with a precision that told Jack everything he needed to know. His tactics had impressed them. They weren't playing anymore. One of them moved toward the tripwire. Another few inches. Then, a snap. A flash. The explosion tore through the jungle, shockwaves splitting bark and throwing debris skyward. One Shitaith was caught in the blast, thrown backward with a wet crunch. The others reacted instantly, ducking, shifting into a defensive stance. Jack didn't wait. He fired. The first round slammed into a warrior's chest, punching through armor and sending him sprawling. The second dropped into a crouch, raising a gauntlet to deflect the next shot. Jack adjusted, firing lower, striking the exposed joint of the knee. The alien roared, collapsing as dark ichor sprayed the ground. Then the rest moved. Jack rolled, barely avoiding a plasma bolt that scorched the ground where he had stood a heartbeat before. They were fast, faster than he'd given them credit for. He pivoted, squeezing the trigger again, forcing them into cover. Then the commander charged. It was a blur of muscle and speed, closing the distance in seconds. Jack barely had time to drop the rifle before the impact came. The force sent him backward, crashing against a tree. Stars burst in his vision, but he fought through it, reacting purely on instinct. The commander came in with a downward strike. Jack twisted, the alien's gauntlet fist splintering bark where his head had been. He countered, knife flashing upward, but the warrior was ready, catching his wrist with crushing strength. Jack felt bones grind. He pivoted, using the momentum to twist free, planting a solid kick into the alien's side. It barely staggered, snarling as it lunged again. Jack ducked, slipping behind, and drove his knife into the back of its knee. The warrior roared, but Jack was already moving. He rolled forward, reclaiming his rifle, and in a single motion, turned and fired. The shot took the commander in the throat. The alien staggered, choking, trying to speak, but no sound came. It collapsed to its knees, then fell forward, lifeless. Silence. Jack exhaled, muscles coiled, waiting for the next attack. None came. He turned slowly, rifle raised, scanning. The remaining Shitaith were gone, fled. Not out of fear. Something else. Jack frowned, listening. The jungle had gone quiet. No distant howls. No insect hum. Just stillness. Then he felt it. A tremor. Not from the Shitaith. Not from anything natural. Jack tightened his grip. Something else was coming. Jack steadied his rifle, his breath slowing to a measured rhythm. The tremors beneath his boots grew stronger, pulsing like the heartbeat of something ancient. The Shitaith had feared him, but whatever was coming now, it was something else entirely. The jungle responded before he saw it. Branches rattling, the thick undergrowth parting as a shadow loomed through the mist. Jack crouched low, pressing his back against the trunk of a gnarled tree, tracking the movement with sharp, practiced eyes. Then it emerged. It was massive, easily 10 feet tall, its broad, sinewy frame covered in thick, chitinous plates that gleamed in the faint alien light. A predator, its elongated skull lined with jagged ridges, its deep-set eyes glowing with an eerie bioluminescence. Its breath came in slow, heavy huffs, steaming in the humid air. Jack had seen monsters before. He had fought inhuman things, both in war and in the abyss of his nightmares. But this wasn't a mindless beast. It was hunting him. He adjusted his stance, keeping his movements deliberate. The rifle wouldn't drop this thing in one shot. Maybe not in 10. But if it bled, he could work with that. The creature tilted its head, studying him. No immediate charge. No reckless aggression. It was assessing, calculating. It knew what had happened here. Knew he had just killed the strongest of the Shite hunting party. Jack raised his rifle an inch higher. The predator moved first. It was impossibly fast, covering the distance in a blur. Jack fired on instinct, the first shot striking its shoulder, staggering it. The second missed. He was already moving, diving sideways as a clawed hand swiped through the air where he had stood a breath before. He hit the ground rolling, coming up in a crouch, firing again. Another hit, center mass. It barely slowed. The predator lunged. Jack twisted, ducking beneath the sweeping arm, his knife flashing as he drove it deep between two plated ridges. The creature snarled, twisting with unnatural flexibility, striking out with its other arm. Jack didn't fully avoid it. The impact caught him in the ribs, sending him skidding across the damp jungle floor. Pain flared white-hot, but he forced himself up, forced himself to focus. The creature touched its wound, studying the dark ichor that dripped between its fingers. Then it did something Jack didn't expect. It smiled. Not a human smile. A predator's smile. Jack exhaled. Figures. It charged again. This time, he didn't retreat. He moved inside the attack, closing the gap before the creature could react. His knife came up, carving deep across the beast's exposed side. The predator lashed out, but Jack was already ducking, pivoting around its bulk, slamming the butt of his rifle into the back of its skull. The impact staggered it. Not much, but enough. Jack seized the moment, twisting the second salvage grenade free from his belt. He yanked the pin with his teeth and slammed it against the wound he had carved into the creature's side, forcing it deep between the plated ridges. Then he dove. The explosion tore through the jungle, a concussive blast that sent Jack sprawling. His ears rang. The air was thick with the smell of scorched flesh and damp earth. He rolled onto his back, rifle raised, vision blurred. The predator stood, barely. Its massive frame wavered, dark ichor spilling freely now. It took a step toward him, another. Then it stumbled, catching itself against a nearby tree. It looked at him again, and laughed. A low, rumbling sound. Not human, not mocking. Something else. Recognition. Respect. Then, without another word, it turned and vanished into the mist. Jack lay still for a long moment, muscles screaming, lungs burning. The jungle was silent again. He exhaled, pushing himself to his feet. Somewhere above, beyond the canopy, the Galactic Council was watching. They had sent their best. They had deemed humanity weak. Jack smiled, wiping blood from his mouth. They wouldn't make that mistake again.